Hello, this is John Harbour from Exclusive Scottish Visits Luxury Tours. I'm delighted once more to be working with the American Scottish Foundation, and today I'm going to bring you a video of the island of Skye. Actually, it's a short clip because I couldn't possibly do justice to the whole island in the space of just half an hour. So this is going to be part one of a three-part series on the island of Skye. In this video I'm going to take you from the port of Mallaig. We're going to get onto a ferry, cross over to Armadale and work our way up to the capital, Portree. And on the way there's lots of things to see and do. In the meantime, just going to orientate you on a map of Scotland, so let's do that. And all I'll ask you to do now is sit back, relax and enjoy this first part of a video, the island of Skye. So looking at a map of Scotland, it lets you see where the Isle of Skye is in relation to Edinburgh and Glasgow, off the west coast. And zooming into the Isle of Skye allows you to see the ferry crossing from the small fishing village Mallaig on the mainland to Armadale on the southern tip of Skye. A crossing time of some 45 minutes. Skye, often known as the Misty Isle, has intrigued many for thousands of years, and I'm looking forward to taking you around this wonderful island. This is going to be part one, Mallaig to Portree. Mallaig is a very popular tourist destination. It's only got about 1,000 people, but during the summer that increases to 5,000–10,000 people. And why? Because this is where you take the ferry to the island of Skye. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're taking the ferry across to the island of Skye, but later on, when we finish the tour, we'll be coming off the Isle of Skye via the bridge. There's a third way of getting across there, that's the Glenelg ferry, and I'll talk about that perhaps later. As I say, it's a very small fishing port, increased in size simply by the folk that want to take this ferry and go across the lovely strait. You can just see the islands behind me in the distance, and I'm just looking now and I can see the ferry's in, so we'll get cracking, get on the ferry and head off to the island of Skye. Mallaig is a lovely little village and very much a working fishing port today. There's a small ship repair yard with a fishing boat up on the ramps, as you can see. There's a number of hotels and restaurants that cater for a summer tourist trade. And I can recommend the ice cream shop, not far from where I'm standing, and the sitting out area, but beware of the giant seagulls that can swoop down with uncanny dexterity and extract the very ice cream from the unwary hand. So let's get into the car, head for the jetty, get in line and get on board that wonderful ferry, and let me take you over to the Isle of Skye from Mallaig to Armadale and show you Skye Part 1 from Armadale to Portree.
So she sailed on a day over the sea to Skye. Billow and bree, highlands and seas, mountains of rain and sun. All that was good, all that was fair, all that was me is gone. Sing me a song of a lass that is gone. Say, could that lass be I?
If you look at a map of Scotland, you'll see on the west coast a set of islands, and these are the Inner Hebrides, and they're made up of Mull, of Jura, of Skye. And Skye actually is the largest island in the Inner Hebrides. Beyond Skye and the Inner Hebrides you have the Outer Hebrides, and that's Barra, that's Harris, that's Uis. And then about 30 miles further on from that you have the island group called St Kilda, and they were evacuated in the 1930s because it's just not sustainable. Skye is about 60 miles long. It's about 640 square miles and there's about 10,000 people on board. And to some extent, Skye seems to radiate from the centre, and that is the Coolin Mountains all the way down to the coast. And I'm looking forward to actually doing a wee tour around Skye. It's only 40 minutes crossing, and on our route to the south we can see the small isles made up of Egg, Rum and Canna. And I'll be telling you a sad story of Egg on our tour around Skye. Just ahead on our right hand side we get a great view of Sabalmora Steg, a higher education college where its sole medium of instruction on degree courses is Scottish Gaelic. As we're approaching the jetty, you get the best view of Armadale Castle, sitting on a small rise just above the ferry terminal. The castle is a ruined country house dating from about 1815, and it was a former home of the MacDonalds. There was a previous mansion from the 1790s, but what was left of it was incorporated into this castle. And you can see part of it, the white building to the right of the grey stone castle. In 1925, the castle was abandoned by the MacDonald family and has fallen into ruin. The wonderful thing about the castle now is that it has become a romantic ruin in the midst of beautifully maintained gardens, in the midst of which can also be found the Clan Donald Centre, which operates as the Museum of the Isles. And so we arrive at Armadale Port on the south tip of the Isle of Skye. Welcome to south of Skye, as it says, and further on, just up the road on the left-hand side, we actually come to Armadale Castle. We saw it coming in on the ferry on the right-hand side. Within the grounds you have the museum for the MacDonald clan, and then looking at the ruin itself, it's wonderful. And within the ruin there's a beautiful balustrade, an old staircase, and sometimes you'll see a wedding couple having their photograph taken there. And then the castle from behind, looking out to sea. What a glorious sight. And when we eventually leave the castle, we'll drive up the road, and on the right hand side we're going to see the ruins of Knock Castle. When you come off the ferry, you see that Armadale Castle is up on the left hand side, and then you come past the Gaelic College, and not long after that you may, on the right hand side, see what looks like a ruin on the hillside. Well, directly behind me is the ruin you're looking at, and this is the ruin of Knock Castle. Now this is a 15th century keep. It would have been just a tower house, and it belonged to the MacLeods. They're the ones that built it. But between the MacLeods and the MacDonalds, who were always at war, the MacDonalds eventually took the castle and maintained it until 1689, when it was abandoned. And after that, of course, the MacDonalds built other castles for them to live in. The keep itself is only one wall left, and the reason there's only one wall left is most of the stone, well, of course, it would have collapsed after all these years, hundreds of years, but quite a lot of the stone went to build local buildings. And one of those buildings was the Torabhaig Distllery that I'm going to be introducing to you shortly. And you can see the way it's built. It clearly is made of the old castle stone. The castle is meant to be haunted by a green lady, but the green lady is meant to be associated with fortunes of the family. It's a nice old ruin, just sitting there on top of the wee hillock looking out over the sea. And if you come down, you can actually walk down to the castle and have a visit. Would I visit it? Yes, during the day I would, but if you're coming at night, maybe bring somebody with you. As I mentioned, the stone from the walls of Knock Castle, which you can see just to the left of the wall here, have gone to build Torabhaig Distllery. It was originally a farm steading and opened in 2017. And only one other distillery is on Skye, and that's Talisker at the other side of the island. Torabhaig's first whisky was released in 2021, entitled the Legacy Series. On leaving Torabhaig, we continue on the road, arriving a little while later at the wonderful Kinloch Lodge Hotel, which has been a family-run home for centuries and a hotel for around 50 years. Let me tell you a little about this exquisite house with views from the house to die for. Kinloch Lodge was built originally as a farmhouse in 1676, and then it was taken over by the MacDonalds, who converted it into a shooting lodge. And behind me you can see the original house, although to the right, to your right, you can actually see an extension that's been put there because it was owned by Godfrey. He was the Lord High Clan Chief of Clan MacDonald. He was married to Claire MacDonald, and she was the world-renowned chef, Claire MacDonald. In fact, you may well have bought some of her books and made some of her recipes. They brought up 4 children here, had many dogs apparently, and eventually in 1972 it was converted into an exquisite 5-star hotel. It's now today run by Isabella, one of their daughters.
Well, that was the lovely Kinloch Lodge. Well, as we go further up the coast, we come to Calrea, and this shaded yellow area is the shortest crossing point between the mainland and the island of Skye, where we find another route to cross over to the island, and this is the Glenelg Ferry, and would have been an important crossing point for hundreds of years. This is the original Skye ferry, and you travel aboard the Glenahulish, the last surviving manually operated turntable ferry in the world. It only carries 6 cars and is testament to the car ferry service that's operated here since 1934.
Go. The Glenelg Ferry.
Well, when we leave the Glenelg Ferry at Calrea, we head around the coast to the small town of Bradford, Skye's second largest settlement after Portree. It has all the local amenities such as a supermarket and lots of hotels and B&Bs. The main hotel is the Bradford Hotel, and has a little secret that I'm about to tell you about. It is in fact the birthplace of that wonderful Scottish liqueur, Drambuie.
I've talked about Bonnie Prince Charlie. Now, Bonnie Prince Charlie, who was heavily defeated at Culloden, fled. And when he fled, he then ended up in Skye, the Isle of Skye. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. But when he ended up here, 1 or 2 people helped him. And there was a gentleman called Captain James McKinnon. And McKinnon hid the prince. And before the prince left the island, the prince handed him a piece of paper on which was a recipe for a very prized liqueur. Now, McKinnon decided he either sold or he gave it to James Ross. Now, James Ross was running this hotel, the Bradford Hotel at the time. And what Ross did was he manipulated that recipe in such a way that he ended up producing a liqueur, not just any liqueur. This is one of the most famous liqueurs in Scotland, and it's called Drambuie. Thank you. The famous Drambuie. Oh, by the way, that was my grandson, Oliver, who popped into the shot there.
Drambuie, the wonderful Scottish liqueur, and if you mix it with a single malt, then you get the drink called the Rusty Nail. Strongly recommend you give it a go. Well, as we move up the coast of Skye, we pass the mountain called Ben Caillig, Mountain of the Old Woman, with the Cuillin Mountains coming into view as we arrive at the small settlement of Sconser. Now, Sconser is a small community, it's got a small port, and the ferry to the island of Rassie runs from here. It's just a small car ferry to the island and serves the island community with a population of less than 200. There is a new distillery on the island, but the story that I want to tell you about is Callum's Road. and the amazing grit and determination of one man.
Callum's Road is all about a man named Callum MacLeod who lived on Rassay. Actually, he lived at the north end of Rassay, and there was a dirt track connecting his house with the settlement down in the south. Now, Callum and his associates had petitioned the local authority for years about connecting his settlement, the dirt track, with the main settlement, and nothing was ever done. It fell on deaf ears. Well, Callum decided to do something about it. I'd like to quote from Roger Hutchinson's book, actually called Callum's Road, how Callum took matters into his own hands and did something about it. Now, to quote from Roger, he said, "One spring morning, Callum set off with a pick, a shovel and a wheelbarrow, and alone in an empty landscape began with his bare hands a romantic, quixotic venture that would dominate the last 20 years of his life. Callum's Road would become a powerful and beautiful symbol of one man's defiance against the erosion of his native culture."
Well, Callum MacLeod, what a man, what an achievement. And you can still see Callum's Road when you visit Rassay today. Well, we continue round the coastal road to Sligachan, a crossroads in the centre of Skye. We pass Sligachan Loch on our route before arriving at the bridge at Sligachan, with wonderful views of the Black Cuillins on one side and the Red Cuillins on the other. And by the bridge is the Sligachan Hotel, which has been welcoming walkers, explorers and mountaineers since 1830. And if you cross the bridge, you will see a large bronze statue of two men, John Mackenzie, a local man, and Professor Norman Colley, an internationally renowned scientist and regular visitor to the area, and their friendship provided many of the well-known routes across the mountain ranges of Skye. But what is the connection between these mountains and the towering peaks of Nepal? Here's a wee story.
In 1889, a gentleman called Major Charles Bruce, who was a Gurkha regiment officer, he came here with the intention of climbing the Black Cuillins. And this is the Red Cuillin behind me, and the Black Cuillins are down in that direction. The Gurkhas are a group of soldiers recruited from the Kingdom of Nepal. Now, with Major Bruce, he brought a gentleman called Harkabir Tharpa. He was a rifleman, and he was also his batman. And while they were on the bridge overlooking the river here, he said to Harkabir, "Why don't you have a bash at running up that mountain, see how long it would take you to get up there and come back down again?" Well, he took off, and 1 hour 15 minutes later he returned on the bridge and met the Major. Now, they went into the ale house behind us, and he told everybody that his rifleman had actually only taken 1 hour 15 minutes to get to the top. Now, MacLeod and MacLeod, the local clan chief, heard this, and considering that scree, it's very steep, and in fact Harkabir Tharpa was actually running in the bare feet. He didn't believe him, and he said, "No, I don't believe it. Let him do it again with people who are actually there to see it happen." So Harkabir Tharpa stood on the bridge and then ran back up that hill. He came back in 55 minutes, cutting a full 20 minutes off his time. That record stood until the 1980s. In honour of Harkabir Tharpa's attempt and great feat, there is now a race to the top of Glameig, it's called. The mountain behind me is called Glameig, and every year that takes place here. And it took until 1980, almost 100 years, for somebody to actually break his record. Remember, they're running in good kit. Harkabir Tharpa ran up there in bare feet. Gurkha soldiers native to the Kingdom of Nepal were recruited by the British Army after the British saw how effective they were during the Anglo-Nepalese War of 1814 to 16. And they're still employed today, and from a much respected army unit, and that's greatly contributed to the British Army. I believe it was a former Indian Chief of Staff who was reputed to have said, "If a man says he's not afraid of dying, he's either lying or he's a Gurkha." There was a nice end to Harkabir's story. He served in the British Army for many more years, and also during that time he survived the Battle of Gallipoli and also the First World War, and eventually retired in a senior position and enjoyed a good old age.
Well, on leaving Sligachan, we drive all the way to the north until we arrive at Portree, the capital of the island. And the first thing you'll notice is on the left-hand side the Aros Experience. It's a visitor centre which is a community cultural centre offering a restaurant, cinema and locally produced shopping. And then we arrive in the centre of the town of Portree, the island's capital and picturesque fishing port with its traditional coloured houses on the waterfront.
Well, I'm standing right in the middle of Portree, and behind me is the War Memorial, and just to the right of the War Memorial is a Freemasons building that's been here for many years as well. This is the centre, and there's a couple of lovely restaurants around here. The Cahoolin restaurant, which is just across the way, is a lovely seafood restaurant, and that's connected with Sea Breezes, which is actually on the waterfront, and we'll let you see the waterfront in a while. The other place I love to go is the Granary, and that's in the corner. But you know, this is quiet this morning because of course we've come up very early to try and get away from all the noise and the bustle. But come midday, this will be heaving. Portree gets absolutely packed. And the great thing about the place is that you meet people from all over the world. Just behind you are 3 stances for coaches, for example, and there's a coach that runs from here directly to Glasgow, and that brings tourists from all over the world. Normally the small buses bring in 20 or 30 people, and once again they just settle here and enjoy Skye. So this is the centre of Portree, and I'm looking forward to heading up north very shortly to the Trotternish Ridge. As I say, Portree has everything a visitor needs, with cafes, restaurants, banks and churches, not necessarily in that order. There's also a daily bus service from Portree to Inverness and Glasgow, so you can see it's a bit of a hub, and it's not uncommon to meet fellow travellers and tour guides on their own journey across the island. It's particularly fun if you're visiting in the summer when the Skye Highland Games are on. I always take half a day out with my guests to attend that and have some fun watching the different competitions, including tossing the caber, the dancers and the kilts swirling and bagpipes galore. The Royal Hotel is the site of the old McNab's Inn, and this is apparently where Flora MacDonald met Bonnie Prince Charlie for the last time in 1746. She'd helped him escape from the clutches of the British Army from the Outer Hebrides after his bitter defeat at the Battle of Culloden. Well, much more about Flora MacDonald later, in future episodes, but sadly time has run out and we must end there. Next time, we'll be heading north and onto the Trotternish Ridge. And as we drive around the ridge, we'll see the Old Man of Storr, a rock pinnacle standing over 200 feet above sea level. Extraordinary. We'll see the Dinosaur Museum. And we'll also see the famous Quorang with amazing rock formations, as well as Duntulm Castle sitting high on a promontory overlooking the sea. And finally, Flora MacDonald's grave. Well, I hope you enjoyed that short tour, the first part of a 3-part series on the island of Skye. We went from the port of Malig, across on the ferry, over to Armadale, up to Broadford and then on to the capital, Portree. It was short and sharp, as I explained before, and of course I hope that you will join me again to watch the next 2 parts. I've also published 3-part series of my Unique Scotland audio podcasts, and you can get those on any podcast channel. All that remains for me to say is delighted to have you with me today, and on behalf of myself, John at Exclusive Scottish Visits, and the American Scottish Foundation, thank you very much indeed for watching. Slán Java.